Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this panel discussion on transforming businesses through co-creation. The panel will highlight the need and role of corporates and the government departments in nurturing the startup ecosystem. I would like to introduce the moderator, Shobana Kamineni, Executive Vice Chairperson, Apollo Hospitals Enterprise Limited. Ms. Shobana steers the organization's emergence as a proponent of integrated digital-first healthcare services in India through Apollo 24/7 and heads Apollo Pharmacy. She was also the founder and chairperson of Apollo Munich Health Insurance. She has been a recipient of prestigious national awards for entrepreneurship and leadership. I now hand it over to Ms. Shobana to take the discussion forward.
Thank you, Diksha. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And it's Monday afternoon. We're really in the middle of the third wave of the pandemic. So I hope all of you are safe and doing well. Thank you, DPIIT and the organizers for putting together this session. It's a perfect match with the overall theme, for the week-long innovation week that you're holding. So this particular discussion on transforming a business through co-creation. With me is a great panel. Shri Ajay Kumar is the Secretary, Ministry of Defense. Shri Rajesh Gokhale is the Secretary, Department of Biotechnology. My friend and fellow past president, CII, Chris Gopal Krishnan, is the chairman of Axelor Ventures and one of the co-founders of Infosys. Mr. Aditya Natraj is the CEO of the Piramal Foundation. And Sanjeev Kumar is most famously known as a chef, but he's also quite the entrepreneur for many years, and he brings a unique perspective of a very, very large industry. So again, as we all know, India today ranks third in terms of the startup count, following the US and China. But while the US has 65% of unicorns worldwide, China 14%, India just has 4%. And at last count, there were about 85 unicorns. This was early in 2022. But Chris, have we reached 100?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay,
but
so this, yeah, soon. But we're steadily evolving into global entities, and we're creating business products and solutions for the world, which is a great thing. So there are three distinct reasons why it's important to encourage startups. First, we have to figure out how to harness the incredible energy and innovation that exists among the large number of one of the youngest populations on Earth. And we need to harness this for the rest of the world. Second, this is one way to create a multiplier in our economy so that we can address not just normal growth, but also the big challenges that society needs, the challenges of poverty and of environment sustainability, and solve this for India fast and furiously, but also for the rest of the world. And the third, that the startup economy, it's really proven that it creates a large number of jobs. And large companies get into a steady state, start looking, for optimization. But the startups are the ones that are really recruiting. If you see all the B schools, engineering colleges, there's a dearth for talent. There's also a huge rush to upskill. So I think what it is that it's providing good talent, high quality talent. And this is something that India can really play a role. And more than anything else, it will lift the GDP of our country. So three major reasons why it's important. Fortunately, the government recognizes this, and we've really had a favorable regime. I think that a lot of the credit of this innovation goes to them. And early on, 10 years ago, it was probably the angel investors. Now we're seeing, the private equity funds from around the world. But most interestingly, it's Indian corporates. Not only are they allocating funds for startups and to co-create to solve their business problems as they go digital, but also family offices. And I think that Chris Gopalkrishnan for sure is one of the big ones who will talk about that. And then we have Ajay from the Piramal Foundation who talk about how they're using it for good. So I think that so the um, one of the things that I looked at being, I've spent 35 years in business now, 35, 40 years in business. And we tend to look, so narrowly in the construct that we've been that we've been coached to do. Look at your balance sheet, look at your strategy, what's your growth, your revenues, all these things, and productivity. Suddenly, in the new startup economy, everyone is looking at things differently. And I think that is the greatest thing because it troubles us. I think that as we, spent a lot of time working in CII, and we said, Indian industry invests so little in innovation and in research. And so does the country for that matter. If you look at where we stand, it's abysmal about how much we spend on research. And I think that to me, one of the second order consequences of having a very strong startup economy of people who are innovating is this, that we can actually use some of this investment to solve and to innovate the big challenges of the future. If you think the mRNA platform for the vaccine that was done, that platform is not just done for the COVID vaccine. Now it can be used for a series of innovations that will help healthcare across and which will drive, which will lower the cost of healthcare and for rare diseases. So I think that India will very quickly be in that spot that we can use, some of the formidable brain power we have for this. Coming to today's panel, this is just the context that I set. We have all the experts here, and I really want to give them a chance to spend time with you and talk. Everyone has agreed that they're going to spend 5 minutes on actually talking about what their unique perspective of transforming businesses through co-creation, and with that, I think that it'll naturally come out with a bunch of questions that I hope we'll have time to ask. And may I first request Shri Ajay Kumar, who's the Secretary, Ministry of Defense, to give us his opening remarks. Shri Ajay Kumar, of course, his experience. He's a Kerala cadre officer, and he's been the chairman of the governing board of the Info Park. And he's really been in the IT sector for a long time and comes with that kind of experience. So I think that straddling both, he's also a distinguished alumni of IIT Kanpur and a doctorate himself. So I think that with that unique perspective, we're very excited to hear from you, Secretary.
Good afternoon, Ms. Kamineni and distinguished panelists. Thank you very much. I think it's a privilege to be talking to some of the industry leaders as well as Secretary DST, who's on the panel. It's actually kind of surprising that Defense Secretary is here on a Startup India discussion. And I think that in itself is a big statement. And that shows how important what is happening in the defense sector. I always believe that for each sector, there comes a time when that sector starts to unfold itself. And defense really, if we look at it, both with the traction which industry and startups have shown, which I am going to talk very briefly, shortly, as well as the political determination which the government has shown with respect to driving innovation and industry in this sector. I think this is the time in which this is, as we speak now, this is the time when defense sector is really taking off in this country. Just to mention, I mean, this is a $300 to $500 billion industry, and we have had the dubious distinction of being the largest importer in the world. Things are slowly changing now, and we have now, from being a big importer, we have for the first time entered into the exporters list, also top 25 exporters, and I think this trend would continue. The second point I wanted to make is today, like everywhere else in all other sectors, we do find a huge impact of digital technologies on defense sector as well. Whether it is in terms of operations, whether it is in terms of arms, equipment, weapons, digital technologies are playing a very important role. And this gives India, with all its strength in the digital technologies that we have, to actually make a quantum jump and take a break and take a leap into cutting edge status of where the technology today exists. Now let me now jump into where the startups come into this. In 2018, for the first time in defense, we said, let us get startups into the fold of defense innovation. And there were a lot of doubting Toms who said, what could startups do? Defense is typically seen with big numbers, big capital investments, big players world over, actually, who have been working in this sector. When we first launched the IDEX program in defense, where the idea was to bring startups close to the needs of armed forces, we were also ourselves trying to see how it is going to work out. This was done in the form of Defense India Startup Challenge, where real-time problems of armed forces were thrown up and startups were asked to come and propose solutions. I'm happy to say that over the last 3 years, we have had several subsequent rounds of these Defense India Startup Challenge. Each round has been more successful than the previous one. And our experience has been that what used to take several years is now innovation is taking place in matter of 10 to 12 months. In the first year itself, we had startups who provided solution to some problems which had been pending with us for a long time. And what used to take hundreds and thousands of crores actually could be resolved with, in IDEX, we give a paltry support of 1.5 crore. And in 10 or 15 crores, most of which used to be startups' own money, they started coming up with solution. I will just want to illustrate this with an example. The problem was to develop a 100 megapixel camera, which is used for, to do surveillance from satellites or drones. We had been importing this camera from Israel. There are only very few countries, handful of countries who produce this. This cost several crores a piece. And a startup in IIT Delhi, some of you may know them, they developed this within 12 months at a cost of 1.5 crore to the government. Not only that, they volunteered to do a 1 gigapixel camera, which today, to best of our knowledge, is only available with NASA. And they said in about 20 crores they could do that. I am just, for sake of shortage of time, I'm not going to go into the details of many such examples which I can talk about, but we have seen the kind of dynamism, the ability to take up multiple problems at a time. Today we have over 1,000 startups who are working in different Defense India Startup Challenge. And the speed of response has been absolutely fantastic. Just to, before I conclude, I just want to say that apart from the Defense India Startup Challenge, we also encourage startups to come up with suo motu proposals, some solutions which they have come up without having specific challenges being offered to them. And we give them opportunity to present their solutions before the armed forces, and if some of those solutions appeal to the armed forces, those are taken forward. Our defense acquisition procedure has been amended so that we can buy from the startups. In the current financial year, for the first time, we provided earmarked 1,000 crores of rupees for procurement from startups. We have also today, under what is called the positive indigenization list, earmarked initially 208 items, and last week we have identified another 351 items which are no import category for us. And each of these 559 items and many more to follow in future are potential problems which our startups can take up. So let me conclude by saying that I think India has today taken up the ambitious target of becoming a global world class defense equipment producer. And our strength in this is the innovation ecosystem which our startups have created and which our industry is, uh, whom we are taking along with us to work with us, are going to create. So this is a golden opportunity, and we look forward to working with the startups in increasing numbers and in increasing number of problems in coming times. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ajay ji. May I ask a question just before we move on, because I might not get you earlier, I mean later. So, China, as we all know, has suddenly instituted a policy where it's pulling out all the major marketplace players of, whether it's Tencent or Ant Financials and all of them, and saying now concentrate more, I mean, less on marketplace activities like shopping and those conveniences, and let's invest more into technology. I mean, deep tech, which will serve us for defense, which will serve us for space, AI, and all the other things. What is India's vision on this? Do you think that we should be thinking separately on those lines and spending some additional money and funding for this?
Yeah, so let me put it like this. I think number one, that our strength is our resources, human resources, and we should leverage this. That is number one. I think if you ask me, our weakness is our regulatory system, and I think wherever we have seen, we have been able to ease the regulation process. And the latest example of this has been COVID. I might remember in 2020 when COVID started, our situation was we did not have ventilators, we did not have any diagnostic systems that were prevalent. There are 5 testing labs across the country at that point of time. We didn't make PP kits, we didn't make any drugs, we didn't make any vaccines. And I remember participating in some of the very early high level meetings where a company in Mysore who was making ventilators and exporting to 8 countries was not able to sell to India because they were not allowed, given the clearance to sell in India. And this case I had been taking up even when I was in the Ministry of Electronics and IT as an electronic product. Of
Thank
course,
you.
the regulation was changed, the processes were changed, and after the regulation has changed, we have all seen how the COVID, everything that we had needed for COVID, we have seen has been innovated, developed, and produced. And Shobna ji, you know this firsthand. Now, the point
Yes.
I'm making, there is no great, we need to learn to trust our own people and our own ecosystem. This is so true also in defense. So I think, one, we need to, and when I talk of human resources, we need to trust our startups, we need to trust our industry, we need to trust our public sector, we need to trust our academia. If we were to trust our human resources are not a constraint. And as far as China's example you mentioned, China did a lot of things as far as defense is concerned, some of which is not following very scrupulously the rules for protection of IPR, and that's been something which in our country we do not need to do. We have shown in IT industry, for example, Chris is here. I mean, 3 decades of absolutely scrupulous, spotless record of having dealt with, uh, integrity of data, integrity of intellectual property, and therefore we are able to create innovation in our own country through our own means, through our own capabilities.
Thank you. Many nice answers in that free market, then of the high international scrutiny encouraged, and the power of our youth, and also that we follow IPR. So thank you for that. Our next speaker is actually a very distinguished scientist, and he's the secretary of the Department of Biotechnology, Dr. Rajesh Gokhale. Professor Gokhale has held many positions across the country, foremost of being leading research. So no one better than him than to talk about the most sensitive subject of today, which is really healthcare and the innovation that is required to be able to deal at speed with coping with not just this pandemic, but what will happen and come in the future, and for India to be for India really to shine in that. And I'm very happy to be working in that sector, and this is something that we get up every day and kind of do in healthcare. So Professor Gokhale, please share your perspective with us.
Thank you, Mrs. Kamineni. This is very happy to be part of this panel. Actually, as Secretary, Ministry of Defense already has said that government secretaries sitting through Innovation Week and startup cultures is rather interesting to look at, and many of us have very similar ideas. Let me give you a small example of what government thinks today of actually. And I don't know how many of you have seen this movie Avengers Endgame. This was a little amazing movie actually, because several heroes come together to fight the enemy there, and because the enemy was so daunting that all these Spider-Man, Superman, all these other superheroes starting to come together. In fact, that's what we perceive right now as the present challenges in country and in international situation is actually. So clearly, rather than egocentric heroes, who try and in typical Bollywood style would kill everybody by a single person, we cannot handle and do this kind of. So the co-creation is obviously what even government thinks is the way to move ahead. Actually, how to get together with the government and the corporate structures to be able to synchronize and synthesize new ideas to come together and bring it to them. But there are contradictions, right? I mean, and the contradictions are, for example, if you really look at corporates, they want immediate short-term impact, actually. Clearly, they are focused and fast. Government is in capacity building mode. They have long-term impact. Their enablement of variety of processes. The baselines start from zero, sometimes not even, where you may be able to look at it. So how do we bridge these kind of two interesting entities actually more and more to be able to bring the value actually? And I think that's really, really very critical to start thinking from the point of view of biotech industry to be able to look at. And as you rightly pointed out, the COVID, and also as my previous speaker said, there are very interesting patterns that has come out of it actually, which are very, very critical to look at. Non-fiscal resources that we create in this country becomes a very, very critical part on how industry works on top of them to be able to carry out actually. And it's only government who can carry out these non-fiscal resources and maintain them for long period of time actually. The second aspect of that is to really, what I really think is very, very critical to look at is, government is clearly has been the biotech industry. For example, at least the Department of Biotechnology set up BIRAC, which has been an enabler for more than 5,000 companies now for over last more than 7-8 years actually. I mean, without that, I can almost say that the biotech, without the BIRAC system, the biotech ecosystem would not have got up in this country at all together actually. So it has really changed the number of people, number of values, number of criteria that we look at into it. However, even for doing this, the BioNest incubator program that Department of Biotechnology set up, there are about 60 such incubators across the country actually. And these incubators, about more than 1,500 incubatees that have been incubated, and about more than 1,100 IPs have been filed from these incubatees actually over a period of time. And it's about the total number of people that have benefited is very large, which have created about 700 products that are presently in the market over a period of time. Even though for a country of this size, we may not say this is spectacular, but I think it's an amazing beginning, what I always say, is to be able to carry out these variety of important activities. The ways that one can look at it, as I said, is actually to collaborate and communicate with each other is really very critical in a such infant industry, which is the biotech industry, actually. On its own, there are, so much to do, has an infinite potential because, every biological system teaches you something new as you come along actually with the time. And therefore, it allows you to come up with the new patterns of how startups can evolve or how systems can evolve. However, often, as I always say, there are paradoxical thoughts and ideas. So, for example, on one side, you have focus, you require a focus, you require growth. And the focus and growth, in fact, are contradictory words, actually. They, in fact, on one side, you want to really be focused. On the other side, you want to grow and divide rapidly. So how do you really do this? And I don't see any other way than to what the thematic topic is to co-create this in an environment where we can actually collaborate and be able to carry out these activities. How do we really bring the sense together? And as my previous speaker said, again refer to him, always the biggest challenge in biotech industry has been that the regulatory is very slow. You can see that the vaccines and drugs used to take 10 years to come, and we now know a process by which vaccines can come to the market and bring to the people in 10 months of time. The regulatory people got start to end, it was within the people actually. So this is clearly disruptive innovation at its best, actually. So all the pandemics and all these areas actually allow you to come up with mechanisms that are really amazing to carry out. I think it's really the beauty of this co-creation models is that, what biologically I call symbiotism, actually, symbiont. Symbiosis is a way the environment works, the way all the evolutionary processes work, the way every system incorporates itself on each other such that they benefit from these mutual adherences, actually. I think I'll stop here, but say, biotech industry can only grow by all these kind of combination of these two aspects of value creation and taking care of both speed, but as well as enablement, because that's the only way we can solve problems of future and create some really interesting values that are of immense value, both in health, agriculture, as well as livestock and variety of areas that are very, very critical to this country's growth. Thank you. I think I'll stop here with this brief comments.
Thank you so much. Man after my own heart, that you enjoy the Marvel Universe. And definitely, I think that the Avenger analogy was really on point, because it takes many to be able to overcome, but it also takes many to co-create. And there's nothing, I think, that in your final message of symbiosis, nature co-creates. And these are lessons that we haven't learned enough of how we can do this. So I really enjoyed listening to you, as I'm sure that everyone else did. We'll now move on to Mr. Aditya Natraj. Aditya Natraj is also with me a fellow Aspen member and Aspen India fellow, and but he's also held many positions, including in KPMG, but now is part of the Pyramid Foundation. So it'll be interesting to get your perspective of the importance of having foundations also help in co-creation, help in the startup journey, and what are those unique facets that you look for in a startup that others would not? What matters most to you?
Thank you so much, Shobna. It's been really interesting listening to what is happening in defense and biotech. I thought the social space was the one that was innovating the most.
Hey, a little louder, please, Aditya, because I don't know.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much
sorry.
better.
Yeah. I said it's really interesting to hear what is happening in defense and biotech. I moved from the corporate sector to the social sector because I think the amount of innovation we need in the social sector is even greater than what we need in the unicorns. Consciously bets on high impact solutions which have opportunity to become in the social, we look for deep-seated problems.
Hey, go ahead and remove your video.
Years, and how we invent solutions to people. I'm sorry, is this better? Yeah. I'm sorry, my internet seems to be playing up. Can you hear me now, Shobna? Yeah. So I was saying, as the foundation, we invest in social sector unicorns. That's our USP. We're saying, as we are investing in defense, biotech, food processing, we work in the bottom 112 districts in the country. These are the aspirational districts. It's a massive program launched by the Prime Minister. If you took the Human Development Index of these 112 districts, and these were a separate country, they would actually be lower than South Sudan. That's how bad the human development in education and health is. Because the standard solutions that apply in Pune or in Marathwada do not apply in the Chota Nagpur plateau in Jharkhand, do not apply in the Brahmaputra ravaged flood areas in Assam, do not apply in the tiger sanctuaries in Madhya Pradesh. So you need to find innovative solutions for health and education in these spaces. And that's what we are very focused on. So let me give you an example. For example, in health, we know that 80% of the disease burden comes from poor drinking water. But how do you improve quality of drinking water? In an urban area, you can have an aqua guard in each house, and but the capital cost of putting an aqua guard in each house in a rural area is absolutely astronomical. So you need to design community-based water solutions. So for example, there are community-based water solutions where you have an aquaguard for the community as a whole, for 300 households as a whole. And that reduces the capex cost. And then you have innovative solutions so the immune for the capex. The government is paying for the capex. The social sector is doing the mobilization. An independent local franchise in the operation, or you're able to out of an extremely complex problem which you've been stuck with. We are as a foundation run this in over 2,000 communities across the country. Women and gender is a major issue. We know that the number of women are substantial, and once you go into rural, and then you go into tribal, and then you go into aspirational districts, it just becomes multiple reasons why herself. And the standard solutions have always been around, okay, let's teach her tailoring, let's teach her to make papad and put her into self-help groups. But we've actually got innovative ways in which we've got these women getting into digital careers, doing the most high-end digital jobs, working for the most high-end companies across India and the world. Because I think there's huge opportunity. There is no lack of intelligence in the women. It is just to be taught the most high-end technologies and the availability of platforms for this. So whether it is about water or whether it is about women, I think there's huge opportunity for innovation in Bharat as opposed to just in India. And I think that requires us pose ourselves to the opportunities in Bharat. We don't as yet have enough exposure for young people coming out of IITs who are coming out of Stephens to go and actually understand economic issues, engineering issues, and opportunities, gender issues in the rural areas, which is why we run a massive fellowship where we take people from the top 100 colleges in the country and allow them to work in the really rural areas and come up with innovative solutions. Let me give you an example of something that I heard recently, just a few weeks ago, from a fellow. When we're designing detergents, for example, in India, we're constantly taking out, dag, which is, mud, which is what is an urban concept. In rural India, he was with a farmer and he says, every evening you come back and you have thorns in your dhoti because as you're going through the thicket, you actually have several thorns. And the woman in the house comes and takes out those thorns one by one from the dhoti because the detergent doesn't take it out. And now he's therefore committing his IIT chemical engineering knowledge to actually try and find a detergent which can remove thorns. So I think innovation comes from bringing people together between the government, the non-profits, and innovative young people. And that's completely the co-creation system that we need.
Thank you. Thanks, Aditya. Very, very practical. And I think that's a fantastic perspective, really humanizing it for the largest number. So doing good for the largest number. Our next speaker is world-renowned chef Sanjeev Kapoor. And everybody's seen him on TV and this thing, but we also do know that you've had a very interesting entrepreneurial journey, and some of that journey also involves having partners and co-creating. So please share some of those insights with us.
Thank you, Shobna. Interesting. I think the whole panel selection is fantastic, where I think everybody who has spoken till now has some role in food. So if we just look at defense, role of food is fairly large. If we were to look at the total Army, Navy, Air Force, so let's look at what 1.6, 1.7 million, and add families to that. That's the whole opportunity of creating in food specifically for them. Somebody can do that. Great. DRDO and many organizations do innovation work and help in food, but that can be done. Biotech, of course, lots can be done. And I have a startup myself where two biotechnologists are helping me create content education for kids in school. And they are biotechnologists. So the interest in food brings that together. And of course, Aditya talks about social sector. And I'm very closely involved with Akshay Patra, where we give meals, midday meals to about 1.8 million kids every day. I think food as an opportunity, we have seen two biggies and third one coming in now with Zomato and Swiggy doing so well in world of food. And Rebel, I think, is really close on their heels, not the same, but in food tech, I would say. It's something that idea that started small became big, and that has inspired lots of people. And in terms of co-creation, I would say what the success has been achieved, let's look at Zomato and Swiggy, is not really because of co-creation, it's in spite of that. And that, as an industry insider, I can say that. Because even today, the big food and food service here, because food is such a large word, because we grow food, we waste 40% of what we grow in India. But conversion that happens, and that conversion people, when consume at home, that is served to them, whether in a restaurant, whether at home or whatever. So I would want to focus on that. In that category, no big corporate, no hotel chains, no restaurant chains, nobody who's there has been, I would say that they've been partners in supplies, but not really in a way that they have enabled co-creation. Even today, I know that there are constant fights that happen. You read about them, that how people are not happy with Zomatos and Swiggies of the world. Now, why should this happen? And I think while it is good to know that co-creation is good, everybody knows that. Does it really happen, and how can we change that? And I think for that, cross-industry collaboration is important. And why I say this is that the food service industry in India largely, I think, is in some sense, it's a very close-knit industry, and the cross-industry exposure is not too much. That, I think, needs to happen, which means that there is some opportunity, let's say, for military that's there, and they need to create something. Maybe hotels and restaurants can contribute in that exposure needs to happen.
from the top before we can think that all this co-creation will really happen at small scale. I faced that. I faced that when I started my journey as an entrepreneur. I started small, and I can tell you that the word I think Rajesh used egocentric. We see in, and this is limited. It's changing from what it was. Remember, we come from an industry where secrets were kept with them. No chef would tell what they put in a dish, right? So when there are secrets, co-creation becomes very difficult. And from there on, from where we have reached today, I think it's a big step, but years to come, we need to nurture, we need to give exposure to this industry in a way. Otherwise, if we look at most of the startups that are coming in food are not coming from people from food industry. They're coming from outside of food industry. There are people who are not food experts or knowledge of food or studied food as their core knowledge, yet they're bringing in solutions in food. And that's been, I meet a lot of prospective startups, and it's consistent. It's not changing. We need to change that. I'm trying, and it's such a large thing, and I know there is Chris who's there, and I would like to hear him what he says. I joined this panel more to hear, not to say, but I would say that in terms of co-creation, all the bodies on food, they need to be sensitized that this is something effectively and eventually would benefit them. It still is a long way, is an industry inside, especially on food service. I'm not, again, I'm focusing this because it's such a large subject. I just want to focus because that's where we've seen good success from Zomato and Swiggy. I want to just say one thing to Aditya. When you mentioned about women making papad, let me tell you, it's one of the most complex things. And the only reason we consider it is that it is lowly skill, because we as Indians have not learned to pay for our papad. Let's start respecting all the skills that are there. Let's give all the things that people put in their heart into and sensitize consumers that it has to be paid for and the real value has to be paid.
Wow, that was fantastic. I think that you really spoke about co-creation in its most practical sense, and I completely agree with what you said. In terms of this cross-industry experience and how you didn't have there are not enough people from your own industry creating, and so much of it is a trust deficit, because then you will have these big guys, more money, and they'll just say that this is an efficiency I can take out. So I think the idea is really that a lot of entrepreneurs are looking to build those defensible moats. What is it? And maybe earlier on it was your secrets that were your defensible moats. But you left us with a very powerful thought. And I think that the value of paying, the value for paying for that particular expertise of a person, whether it's a lady making papads, whether it's a doctor that people now are trying to commoditize and saying, we'll give you a doctor consult for free and things like that, which bug me to know. And I can really relate to whatever you've said. Thank you. I'm so glad you joined this panel. Our last speaker, who I saved for the last, is he's been voted as one of the best top CEOs in Asia, one of the founders of Infosys. So anything to do with technology, Chris has probably written the founding manual on all that. And once he left as CEO and I'm not reading from this extensive thing, but of his resume, but just as how I know Chris, and once he was really the president in CII, who focused a lot on saying that let's make sure that CII is represented by the new age industries also, that we have to bring technology front and center. And he went out that once he left his active role in Infosys, he's become a prolific investor, an angel investor, a deep tech investor, actually looking into sectors. So this whole idea of co-creation, Chris, I'd like you to bring it together. And also if you can tell us, what are the top 3 challenges? I mean, Sanjeev definitely spoke about them, as did all the other speakers about it. But, if you can pull it together, for everyone in the, listening, and for all of us, please share your insights and also these top 3 challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Shobana. My fellow panelists, it's a privilege to be part of this panel. I hope you can hear me properly. See, first of all, I will talk about co-creation and co-creation in the context of existing enterprises and the startups. That's the context in which I'm going to talk about. And in existing enterprises, I would include government. Government is a very large organization, and government produces, government purchases, government is a customer, is a producer. So government plays all these roles just like any other in the enterprise. So setting the context, the external environment and the external knowledge for any organization is significantly larger than the knowledge within the organization. So if I take company XYZ, it has 1,000 employees. The knowledge is a aggregation of the knowledge with these 1,000 employees and maybe some of the past employees. But the world outside is significantly larger. Billions of people, many organizations, etc. And hence, it is important for any organizations to figure out a mechanism to collaborate and participate with the external ecosystem. Second, when you look at an organization, it has its limitations in terms of how much it can invest in innovation, improvement, etc., because that typically gets funded by its internal accruals and the budgets that it can create for itself, whether it's the government or an existing enterprise. Whereas in the outside world, when it comes to startups, startups are funded by venture industry, risk funding, and that industry has figured out how it can actually work with a success ratio of maybe 10%. That means 90% of initiatives may fail, but the 10% that succeed so much or so well that they recover their entire investment plus more. So, the capital that is used is different. Third important difference is existing enterprises, because of its customers, partners, the ability to educate and transform its employees is limited in its speed. Whereas the external world, and especially in the startup world, the speed is probably 3 to 5 times higher, and they're laser focused on one thing, and they do that thing very well, and they're rewarded for that, and their speed is significant. So during COVID times, people talked about it. We see these things actually coming together. Collaboration at the highest level, collaboration across the world, newer technologies being introduced at rapid pace, vaccines being introduced within 10 months, not just introduced, but also people were getting vaccinated, regulators approved, emergency use authorization, etc. all happened together. And that's true in the ventilator example that was quoted also. Now, how can we institutionalize these things? So how an enterprise can institutionalize co-creation? I think Sanjeev mentioned this also. How can we institutionalize this? It happens because you set goals. So for example, if an enterprise or if a government, and government is doing that now, says that 10% of the purchases must happen from startups. if an enterprise says that 1/3 of my revenue must come from new products, and out of that, let's say 50%, that is about 1/6 of my revenue must come from products that I buy from or products I get from working with startups. So setting goals is very important. Creating these boundaries are very important. We also need to look at who drives this. It will have to be driven from the top. In an enterprise, it will be driven from the CEO or the unit head. In a government, it will have to come from right from the top, a minister, a prime minister driving this, a chief minister driving this. And then we need systems, processes, and structures in order to make this happen really. And this is where, BIRAC was mentioned, Bionest incubators was mentioned. BIRAC is probably the best example we have in the government today of how the innovation ecosystem can be stimulated or created by government action. The other example is the IIT Madras Research Park, where the R&D department of a enterprise is co-located with startups and academic institution. So you force that interaction indeed to happen, collaboration to happen. There is another example, which is the National Mission on Interdisciplinary Cyber-Physical Systems, which I chair, where we have created 25 hubs. These are created in academic institutions, but as Section 8 companies, 50% of the board members are from industry, 50% from academia, 50% of their projects will have to be external. So again, you create structures, processes, and systems in order for collaboration to happen. Open innovation is another one where Sanjeev talked about being transparent, being open to ideas from outside, being able to post your problems publicly and get answers and solutions from other sources. So bringing it all together, I believe that there has to be clear understanding, acceptance, and willingness to work with the external world, especially with startups. Then we need to set targets and goals. We need to have measurements because these targets are set publicly. So we need measurements. You need reward systems which reward people who do that. And a reward system can also be said existing revenues will get 100% weightage. Revenues from these new products and new working with startups could get 200% weightage in your reviews. So automatically you incentivize collaboration. And then I talked about how government purchase programs can incentivize, how we can, through programs like BIRAC or structures like BIRAC, we can incentivize working with startups. The National Mission on Interdisciplinary Cyber-Physical Systems, 25 hubs across 25 institutions across the country, set up a collaboration and open innovation programs. Lastly, I strongly believe that when we look at a $5 trillion or a $10 trillion economy that India will create, it will have to be driven primarily through innovation and startups. And the only place where we still have not made progress is in our investment in research. Both industry and government, especially industry, will have to invest a lot more in research, lot more external research with academic and research institutions. I believe that it has to invest 15 times what it invests today, 15 times what it invests, and the government probably 3 times what it invests, 3% of GDP. Right now it's 0.7% of the GDP. And this is something I look forward to. Thank you, Shobna.
Hey, thank you, Chris. We do have 5 minutes. Maybe I can ask the Secretary Defense, Ajay Kumar, to respond to any of these, and especially your comments. And then after that, again, the Secretary Biotechnology.
Thank you. I just want to say that all of us here are possibly agreeing that or recognize the importance of startups and innovation in the economy of the future. I think what is also equally important is that a large number of people who are still not so-called in the converted group, they need to be sensitized of the opportunity, and it is this effort that personally I have found that is something which is the most challenging in actually create further accelerating the growth of startup ecosystem in the country. It is and it is in this direction, the advocacy, the dissemination of information, that is so very important, which industry can industry bodies, these events like these and other people who have become great success or models of success, examples of success, can actually create the confidence and the change of mindset in people, so that even today when India is seen as a country where businesses are to be run on arbitrage and not create value through innovation, I think we need to move away from there and showcase examples of great innovation success creating values, the stories of how unicorns are today exploding in India, of people who have created these unicorns, and that would possibly further accelerate this whole effort of innovation. Thank you.
Thanks. Anything from your side, Professor Gokhale?
I would echo what all the panelists have said. As Chris rightly said, how to institutionalize the co-creative activities is a very critical part that I think government has to play together with the ecosystem to be able to build. And I think as also Sanjeev and Aditya also mentioned, very, very important aspects of it. I mean, my only, one of the point is, particularly looking at the biotechnology industry, it's so new yet, right? Actually, and so many things, so many infinite potential you have in terms of all the sectors that one can bring in. It's very challenging, very demanding, but very exciting. And I would only say to younger people, just overcome your hesitation and grab it right now, because this is what is the real future is all about, actually. And maybe that's all I've learned with, because if we don't animalize everything right now in this country, we probably cannot reach the next milestone that we all looking for at a trillion billion economy, actually. And I think that's what we all need to come together for. Thank you again.
So, thank you. And we, in the 2 minutes, I'd really like to, bring some of these thoughts together that the government has had great success, whether it's UPI, and now we're personally working on the health, you know, the digital health mission. And I think that these are roles specifically that the government can play to facilitate, because from those, it's really spawned multi-billion-dollar industries. And I think that's super important, that the government's role should be in helping to facilitate those large things than rather getting involved. And I think that's where the co-creation really. So if you look at Swiggy and Zomato, they're probably a platform. If you look at the super apps, they're a platform. And it's up to the myriad of younger entrepreneurs that can make use of that to be able to create this great wealth for this country in many forms, whether it's for the underprivileged, environment, sustainability, or just in making commerce easier. So many of these, improving supply chains. There are hundreds and thousands every morning. You can wake up to the opportunities, and I think that's the excitement that will continue to lift and light India for the next decade and even longer. And this will be our transition from being a developed country to among the wealthiest nations of the world. So leave you with that. And again, big thank you to every one of you for contributing with your thoughts so generously. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Shobana.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shobna. Thank you very much.
Lovely meeting.